Hey, have you ever had one of those cars that you loved and adored, eventually sold at some point, right? And immediately after selling it, you get that pit, that remorsefulness, that regret right there. Well, going through those license plates in yesterday's video reminded me of a station wagon that I once had that fits that bill to a T. Now, this wasn't any station wagon, right? This was one of those GM clamshell wagons. The pinnacle of station wagon design. Had the magic tailgate that slid underneath the body of the car. The glass retracted not down into the gate, but up into the roof of the wagon. It was the coolest station wagon ever made. That car still sits with me as a mistake that I made. And so this video is a story about what I should not have done. This story is about a 1973 Oldsmobile custom cruiser. Now, I was searching Craigslist and Daily Lister on a routine basis looking for a really nice clamshell wagon. I come across this little ad in a town called Ontario, Oregon, real close to Boise, Idaho. It had a bunch of lousy photos of a car sitting in a dark barn, lousy description. I make the call to the seller and I request more photos and I get just more of the same thing. Just poor lighting, poor positioning, poor detail, lousy quality photos. But as I'm talking to the seller, I'm gaining more and more information about the seller, about the car, and the history of the car as well. A few days later, I make a second call back to the seller, ask for more information, more details, and paperwork about the car. So I made a plea out to the folks on the Corvair forum, asking if anyone lives in the area and if they'd be willing to take a look at this car. Luckily, one person stepped up, said they're about 25 minutes away. They went out there, took a look at the car. Now, I was asking basic questions to this person doing the inspection for me. Things like rust and does it run and what's the brakes are like and so forth. What they reported back was favorable, right? It ran not well, needed carburetor work, the brakes are good, but it pulls to the side, has old tires, some basic things. So I take a chance, I strike up a deal. The original asking price was $5,500. I negotiated it down to $3,500. Took about 3 or 4 weeks or so before the check got out there, it cleared. The car got picked up on a transport and delivered here to Delaware. And it arrived here the day before Christmas Eve. And what showed up was a crusty, dirty, filthy, but beautiful 1973 Oldsmobile wagon. Even though this car was filthy and dirty and grimy and had decades of what looked like chicken coop dust all over it, you could still see that it looked like factory original paint. It had good wood siding on it, that the interior wasn't ripped or torn up, and it looked like fairly good condition. Plus the mileage was about 53,000 at that time. I also got more information on the history of the car, and what I found out was the person that I bought it from, her grandparents bought the car new in 1973. They lived in Columbus, Ohio. Sometime around 1976, they decided to move to Ontario, Oregon, and a year after that, 1977, the grandmother died. The car got parked in the barn, and that's where it stayed until I bought it. I spent the winter cleaning up this car, replacing everything that needed to be replaced from a car that sat forever, from the gas tank and the fuel system, fuel pump, carburetor, battery, hoses, belts, brake calipers, rotors, drums, you name it, it got done. I turned this car into a dependable, reliable, easy driving car. When spring rolled around, I pulled out the sandpaper, wet sanded that color all the way down to 3000 grit, buffed it to a shine that I've never seen before in lacquer. Now this thing looked so good. The chrome was gleaming, the paint was shining, and the dynock looked brand new. This car came out stunning, and it was a pleasant surprise. I drove that car all summer long, had a blast with it. We went everywhere. That was my daily driver. Unfortunately, in the house that I lived in at that time, we didn't have a garage. The car sat outside, and I knew taking a car from the dry, arid desert and bringing it here to Delaware in the humidity and the rain and the snow is just going to destroy this car. I knew that I couldn't keep it for long, and that was always been my mentality, is that I was going to hit all these cars, this bucket list of cars I've always wanted, and that I wasn't going to fall in love with it, I wasn't going to keep it, and I'm going to move on after a period of time. So within a year or so of buying that car, getting it here, fixing it up, cleaning it up, and enjoying it, when I sold that car, I sold it for top dollar, man. At that time, $9,500 was top dollar for a really nice, clean, original, low mileage clamshell. And I got that easy. Unfortunately, I sold it to a dealer who ended up stripping that factory original paint down to bare metal, spraying it with a 2-stage base coat clear coat system, selling the car for $15,000. I had fun with the car. I enjoyed it. I made a few bucks too. And I'm not in it for the money either. I'm in it for the story and the fun and the thrill and the bucket list of cars that I've always wanted to go after. But it's the one car that I look back at with regret, with remorse, that I wish I still had. Realistically, I couldn't keep it. It had been sitting out there in the weather this whole time, and it would have been turned into rust by now. But I look back at it and saying, I should have kept it. So I'm curious, do you have a car that you wish you got back? I know John Engel has a Ford Cobra that he had sold and he had later gotten back. Do you have something similar to that? I'd love to hear about it. Otherwise, I will see you tomorrow.